afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending upon where you're watching from, where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for being part of this very special program. We look forward, Be'ezrat Hashem, in the future to have many, many more special programs like this where we can include the whole Sha'alvim family, our students, our alumni, some of the alumni were here live, and the parents and our friends in general. We're very excited about today's speaker, Rabbi Joy Rosenfeld. Reb Joy Rosenfeld is a practicing psychotherapist in the addiction field, focusing on the interface between philosophy, spirituality, and psychology. He's working on a monograph, Entering the Sea of Wisdom, an introduction to the teachings of Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern Shlita. Several years ago, Reb Joey began with a small audience in St. Louis, and he decided to seek his audience online. And his online presence of teachings through WhatsApp, through YouTube, have grown incredibly. And we are very excited to welcome him here today. Joey's podcasts and video recordings on works of Jewish philosophy, Kabbalah, and the inner workings of the human soul have been watched and listened to by thousands around the world, and he has a dedicated following of students from the entire spectrum of the Jewish community. We are honored and we are thankful that Joey found the time to share some Torah with us this morning, this afternoon. Thank you very much, Joey.
Okay, Mirza Hashem, the next time I come back, nobody gets to stand up for me. Okay, so my voice is a little bit hoarse, so thank you for the tea, and I apologize for the wait. It's a big honor to speak, first off in front of Rav Goldsmith, in front of Rav Turetsky, and in front of all of you guys. It's certainly not something I ever expected to be doing, so it's pleasant to be surprised. Because we're a little bit short on time, and I want to make sure everybody gets the most important part of the day in, which is dinner, so I'm going to, thankfully this will be briefer than typical. I'm actually going to try something that I haven't done before. Part of kind of what has enabled me to get my thoughts on paper is I've utilized Twitter. I mean, I'm sure many of you have heard of Twitter before. Not advocating for Twitter, it's also like a dumpster fire, but you know, the way that I happen to have used it, it served a purpose for me. And what I would do is I would think of an idea, and based on the learning that I've done in the past, or the study that I've done in the past, you know, after you have children and you're working, it's harder to actually sit and study, so it's more about remembering what you've learned. But I decided for myself to make kind of a notepad of sorts. I would have a topic, I would say Simcha, for example, Torah, for example, and I would list, 7 or 8 tzaddikim, Jewish thinkers, and their opinion on it. Now, instead of writing out a whole drasha, I would remember different makoros, different sources that I learned, and I would try and summarize those sources into one word. And because it was a very easy, bite-sized type of learning, so people began to be excited about them a little bit. But what I've never really done is I've never really tried to open up and show what these lists are actually about. And I figured that this would be a good opportunity to try and take a list that's related to the time that we're in and really examine it to try and give ourselves a picture of what the Torah is, a picture of what Avodas Hashem is, and to see the grand picture of what our tzaddikim have to say about it. One of the most important things to hear is if anybody ever tells you, any rabbi, any teacher ever tells you that there's one way to understand something in the Torah, then you could assume that they're either lying to you or that something's wrong, because the Torah is anything but a one-way street. The Torah, thankfully, especially Torah Sheba'al Peh, is an infinitely growing body of information that throughout the generations, the different tzaddikim, different schools of thought, different teachers have their own way of interpreting various ideas. So the topic we're going to look at is Teshuva. And what we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do with all of the information that we're going to have? We can see 12 different opinions on Teshuva. Does that mean that nobody knows what Teshuva actually is? Does that mean that everybody's just guessing at what Teshuva is? And I believe that the main point of this experiment is to show that the Torah is as big as we are. And just as many of us experience different moods and different feelings from day to day, from hour to hour, sometimes I feel up, sometimes I feel down, sometimes I feel left, sometimes I feel right, sometimes in the very same moment I'm mixed up and confused, I'm not quite sure what it is that I'm feeling. So too the Torah, which is representative of the Jewish neshama, contains all of that for us. It speaks to us wherever we're at. And so when our tzaddikim come to teach us about tshuva, they're not just telling us how to do tshuva when we're feeling up. They're telling us how to do tshuva when we're feeling up, when we're feeling down, when we're feeling sad, excited, anxious, exuberant. The Torah speaks to every possible human experience. There's no human feeling, no emotion that we encounter within ourselves that the Torah, that tzaddikim have not come and given us insight on as to how to move forward. In addition to showing the greatness and the vastness of the Torah, and the greatness is that it's big enough to speak to the multitudes within ourselves, there's another model. I've been working for the last 9 years in St. Louis in a substance abuse treatment center, where I've been working with non-Jewish people who are struggling with addiction. But what I came to discover very early on is that in addition to psychology, these people would benefit from what our teachers had to say as well. So I introduced them to Naaman of Bratslav, and I introduced them to Elijah Kramer, who was the Vilna Gaon, and Leibowitz's theory of doubt, which was the Mashgiach of the Mir, and I found that they were very excited about these ideas as well. When you're dealing with somebody who's suffering from any problem, or trying to overcome any problem, it used to be that we would try and find one way of taking care of it. Here's the problem, here's the solution. But then, utilizing various studies, a lot of different research has gone into this, they developed a model that's referred to as the Swiss cheese model of development. Now, the Swiss cheese model of development is very simple. Every model has holes in it. There's nothing perfect other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So no approach to tshuva is perfect, which means that let's say I choose one model of tshuva. For as much content as there is, there's also going to be holes in it where I can fall into the pitfall of not succeeding in it. So instead of giving up hope, what I do is I grab another piece of Swiss cheese and I line it on top of each other. And the cool thing is that while both pieces of cheese have holes in them, the holes are covered over by the benefits and the greatness of each model. And so the more you lay layers of avoda on top of themselves, the more safe we are in knowing that the benefits of one will overtake the deficiencies in the other. The deficiencies in the other will overtake the deficiencies in another one. And hopefully by laying all of these pieces of tshuva together, we can come out with a little bit of a semblance of tshuva. So what I'll do with you guys, just because if anybody's taking notes, I'll do the quick list, which can be found on my Twitter account. And then what we'll do is we'll go through them. Okay, guys? Any questions so far on anything? Everyone's with me? Okay, great. So tshuva is, the Rambam would say that tshuva is change. The Maharal would say that tshuva is return. Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melublin, who if you haven't heard of yet, you will hear of, says that tshuva is about faith. Rav Kook, Schusi Yogan Aleinu, Rav Avram Yitzchak Kohen Kook, the Kohen Gadol, he says that tshuva is everything. The Ishbitzer Tzadikim, is particularly small but potent Hasidic school, they say that tshuva is about acceptance. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, Schusi Yogan Aleinu, says that tshuva is relative. The Leshem Shavova Chaloma, Rabbi Yoshev's great-grandfather, was one of the biggest Mikubalim in the last 200 years. He says that tshuva is perpetual. The Balatanya, the first Rebbe of Lubavitch, says tshuva is reconnection. The Rav Soloveitchik, Schusi Yogan Aleinu, says that tshuva is a doubled experience, which we'll try and understand what that might mean. Rav Shagar, who maybe you know of, maybe you don't know of, it's not clear whether you'll get to know of him. Rav Shagar says that tshuva is responsibility. Rabbi Nosson of Nimerov, Rabbi Nachman's main disciple, says that tshuva, and here's more than one word, is even a little bit, and we'll get to that. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says that tshuva is awareness, and the Vilna Gaon says tshuva is about rebirth. Anybody want me to repeat any of those? Okay. Yes. So I'll repeat, I'll do the quick list again. Rambam is change, Maharal is return, Rav Tzadok is faith, Rav Kook is everything, Ishbitz is acceptance, Rabbi Nachman is relative, Leshem is perpetual, the Balatanya is reconnection, the Rav is doubled, Rav Shagar is responsibility, Rabbi Nosson is even a little bit, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh is awareness, and the Vilna Gaon, Schusi Yogan Aleinu, is about rebirth. Okay? The one thing that I'm going to ask you to trust me on is that these are based on Makoros. I don't have the mind right now to be able to point out where all of them are. If anybody's interested, I'm more than happy to share. These are not collective opinions. This is not the only thing these tzaddikim say about tshuva, obviously, right? People sometimes will point out something else and I'll be like, I was not trying to say what they only said. This is one makor. But suffice it to say that these are textual based, and if anybody's interested in the specific makoros, I'm happy to share with Rabbi Goldsmith or Rabbi Turetsky as well. Let's start with the Rambam. The Rambam is change. When a person looks at Hilchos Tshuva from the Rambam, what the Rambam does is the Rambam gives us the halachic dimensions of what it means to function as a human being in this world. The Rambam's project, Mishnah Torah, was on a certain level in his mind seen as the final book necessary to be a functioning Jewish person in a pre-modern and modern world. If you were able to learn the Yad HaChazaka, the books of the Rambam, Mishnah Torah, you would theoretically know everything there is to know, and it would be within the parameters of halachic reality. The Rambam's entire Hilchos Tshuva is built around the individual's responsibility to bring about change in their lives. When I find myself stuck, when I find myself struggling, when I find myself tapped into unhealthy behaviors or unwelcomed behaviors, unwelcome thoughts, it's not enough for me to rely on Hashem. It's not enough for me to say, this is part of me, I have to deal with it. The Rambam gives us very clear dimensions of what it means to change. I need to have a certain feeling of regret over the past. I have to have a certain distance away from that negativity in my life. And I have to take upon myself ownership over the future. The responsibility that the Rambam gives to us is very much in line with his emphasis on the ever-present, all-important concept of free will. We have free will and we need to utilize it. But the Rambam describes tshuva as a need to change the directions, how to understand that I am changing. Now it's important to know that for the Rambam, the result is not so much up to us, which is very comforting. Because more often than not, if we feel that we have to go in through a process, then the process is only going to be valuable if I reach the destination. That's not what the Rambam is saying. The Rambam gives us the halachic process of change, and we have to do our best to do it. But the halacha also make rooms for the possibility that we're going to have to try over and over and over again. So the Rambam's perspective on tshuva is change. The perpetual theme is the ability and the need to rectify and take ownership over our own actions. That's the Rambam. The Maharal. And the Maharal is one of the most important Jewish personalities in the history of the unfolding of Torah. Rav Kook referred to the Maharal as the father of the Baal Shem Tov, the founding father of Chasidus, as well as the Vilna Gaon, who was the founding father of what we refer to as the Lithuanian path of Machshava or Musar. Everybody took from the Maharal. People say that the Maharal is most famous because of the legend that he was able to create a golem. The tzaddikim say it's not so impressive that the Maharal would be able to create a golem. What's more impressive are his works. When you learn the Torah of the Maharal, whether it's on Shavuos or Gullus, whatever it is, the Maharal's Torah speaks in a new language, but directly to the heart in a way that you're wondering how somebody from so long ago could understand what I'm going through right here, right now. Thankfully, a lot of the tzaddikim that we're exposed to, Rav Hutner, for example, in the Pachad Yitzchak, Rav Dessler, the schools of Bali Machshava, Rav Moshe Shapiro, they are all children and grandchildren of the Maharal. The Maharal wrote, in one of the places that he writes on, in Nesiv HaTshuva, he wrote about what tshuva is. And for the Maharal, tshuva is return to our essential selves. Tshuva is about returning to who we actually are. Rav Hutner has a language in one of his ma'amarim. He says, to such degrees did that old man go, it sounds less respectful in a translation, but Osa Azaken, to such degrees did he go to remind us that tshuva is nothing other than returning to our source. What does it mean to return to our source? The Maharal, based on Chazal, has a very clear understanding of what the neshama is. We are pure, we are holy, we are good, we are desirous of connection with godliness, We are desirous of detachment from the things that drag us down, and a deep desire to connect to that which is most true in our lives, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu and holiness. But there are certain accidental things in our lives that get in the way, like the body, like desire, like laziness, like sadness, like different emotional experiences. And so the etzem, the essential state of the neshama, is to be connected to God. That doesn't change. That's always true. My neshama is always connected to God. What changes are the levels in which I'm aware of that connection to God. As life continues to happen, as days continue to go on, we begin to feel overwhelmed sometimes, and the connection seems to get severed. But what tshuva is returning back to that which is most natural for me. When at the core of myself, I'm able to close my eyes and say, you know what? I can daven for all of my 10 problems to be fixed, but I could also daven to feel closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which will also be the process in fixing all of those 10 problems. That for the Maharal, the singular dimension that we're searching for is to return back to our true selves. This is a very important teaching when it comes to judging ourselves. Because as Jews and Americans and Jews who live in a particularly difficult point in time, we are very, very, very quick to judge ourselves negatively. We identify ourselves with the wrong in us, and we see the good in us as like accidental. That's not really me. The real me is the negative that I do. So we judge ourselves and we shame ourselves and we feel that we're unable to change. What the Maharal says is that that's a big kfira. That's heresy. The truest essence of a Jewish person is a desire to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Anything else that takes away from that is accidental. The Maharal has a famous teaching. The Jewish people come and say, Rabbeinu Shalom, you're never going to forget Chet HaEgel. You're never going to love us again. You're never going to have room for us again. We messed up so miserably. How can you possibly forget? Hashem says, don't worry, I'm going to forget it. So in a very Jewish way, we're like, oh no, you're going to forget it? You're also going to forget Matan Torah then. And Hashem says, no, don't worry, I'm not going to forget Matan Torah. So I'm going to forget the Egel, but not forget Matan Torah. Why? Says the Maharal, because Matan Torah is the essence of who I am, and the Chet HaEgel is a mikra, it's a chance, it's a symptom. And we identify with the essence and not the symptom. That's the process of tshuva. Rav Tzadok HaKohen MeLublin could speak a lot about Rav Tzadok. I'm sure Rav Tzadok's Svarim are on the shelves here. One of the bigger miracles in Jewish history is that Rav Tzadok's Svarim get to make it onto all the shelves in the Beis Medrash, wherever we are. Rav Tzadok was a brilliant, radical, creative, incredibly brilliant and imaginative thinker when it came to Torah thought. In accordance with Rav Tzadok, any thought that we have is part and parcel of Torah Shemal Peh, or good thoughts. Rav Tzadok HaKohen MeLublin has a very important teaching. He says, okay, so you've fallen, fine, person falls. At this point, all you have to recognize is that Hashem was with you every point of your life, even when you fell. Even when you fell, you were with Hashem. We said in this week's Parsha, Mamrim Hayinu in Hashem. You were rebellious. You pushed against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Tzadok says, don't read it that you were rebellious with God, but Mamrim Hayinu, when you were rebellious, Im Hashem, you were still with Hashem. What that means is that tshuva is about realizing that there's absolutely nothing in my life that was detached from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It may have been an unpleasant experience. It may have been a difficult one. But wherever I am is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. And when a Jew has that faith, when a person is able to recognize that wherever I am, that's where Hashem was with me, and I push myself to move forward based on that knowledge of Hashem's presence, that's how I move forward in tshuva. So for Rav Tzadok, tshuva is faith. The more faith we have in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more we're aware that Hashem is both the beginning, the middle, and the end of our experiences. When we look back on our failures and our struggles, we're no longer stuck in the guilt. Guilt is healthy for a little bit, but guilt very quickly turns into shame. And shame drowns us. Shame doesn't tell me I have done something wrong. It tells me that I am wrong. Guilt is fine. That's part of Yom Kippur. I've done something wrong. I have to fix that. I'm responsible. That's great. The problem is that the boundary line between guilt and shame is very thin, and we tend to fall deeply into shame, where we're now identifying ourselves with our failures, and that's no longer healthy. So for Rav Tzadok, the process of tshuva is having the deep faith that Hashem, there's nothing that I can do in this world that can pull me away from you. And that gives us the power to move closer and closer to Hashem. Rav Kook writes in the beginning of Oros HaTshuva, he said, it's been a really, really long time that I've been thinking about writing about Tshuva. Because in truth, Tshuva is the only thing I ever think about. I couldn't bring myself to write about it, says Rav Kook, because who am I to write about it? That's what Rav Kook said, yet all of us are just busy writing these days, right? But the tzaddikim really, they took it seriously. Rav Kook speaks about Tshuva as the perpetual elevation of all things. Everything in life is always, always moving forward. It's getting better and better and better and better. There is no degradation. From the beginning of history towards the end of history, Ad Vias Goel Tzedek, until Mashiach Tzedkenu comes, everything is about a perpetual movement forward. Upwards, upwards, upwards. Sometimes that upwardness feels like it's going way down. Sometimes that movement towards the light feels like we have to go through all sorts of stuckness and darkness. But Rav Kook never lost sight of the singular focus on the fact that everything is perpetually returning back to its source. Everything, the entire world is in a process of tshuva. Says Rav Kook, eating healthy, it's tshuva. Walking instead of the elevator, tshuva. Drinking water instead of soda, tshuva. Thinking positive thoughts, tshuva. Not getting upset at somebody, tshuva. Doing vidoy, tshuva. Everything is tshuva, everything. To the extent that Rav Kook had a hard time talking about anything else. Because in truth, he didn't. He just spoke about how the whole world is doing tshuva. So tshuva is to allow ourselves to elevate, to move forward ever so slightly, how we view ourselves, how we view other people, how we view our circumstances. Ishbitz. The Ishbitzer Rebbe, the Mei Shiloach, was actually Rav Tzadok's teacher. And we don't know much about the Ishbitzer. My brother, Rabbi Josh Rosenfeld, who gave a series of shiurim on Rav Tzadok, said that the biggest chiddush, the biggest novelty of Rav Tzadok, and all of the thousands of pages that he wrote, is just how big his Rebbe, the Mei Shiloach, must have been. Because we don't have anything from this person. We have a little bit, but this person was a big person. It was very different than the Rambam. Tshuva is self-acceptance. Tshuva is accepting myself as I am. Recognizing, Rabbeinu Shalom, I didn't create myself. I didn't ask for these problems. I didn't ask for these thoughts that make me feel uncomfortable. I didn't ask for the anxiety or the social anxiety or whatever it is. You created me this way. And if you created me this way, that means that you're here with me as well. And when I accept myself, when I stop fighting against myself and I stop judging myself so negatively, I can then actually open myself up to the possibility of change. The Piyazetz Rebbe, Hashem Yimkom Domo, has a very powerful statement. He says, shame is the easiest spiritual experience in the world because it comes most naturally. If I do something wrong, I'm filled with shame. And he says we all have emotional ADD. We all have a difficult time holding on to any emotion for a long time. So the shame hurts, and then it dissipates because I can't hold on to an emotion for very long. And I say, wow, I must have fixed everything because I'm no longer feeling the way I used to feel. Which is why the Piyazetz Rebbe says, Rishoyim Aleim Charatos. Those who are wicked are the ones who are filled with shame. What's harder than shame, harder than beating myself up and saying I can't do it, is actually taking ownership and saying, you know what, I can do it. I accept myself as I am. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be a little bit better in each and every moment. And when I can accept myself, that's when I can begin the process of tshuva, be'ezras Hashem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niv'rau. So that's the Ishbitzer, that's acceptance. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov has a very famous idea. He says, when you do tshuva, and you feel like you finished tshuva, you have to do tshuva again. You have to do tshuva on your first tshuva, and then tshuva on your second tshuva, and then tshuva on your third tshuva. Why? Because tshuva is relative. There's a famous story about Rav Sajigon, Schusio Ganalenu, that his Talmidim came to him, and they saw him rolling around in the snow to try and fix some chait that he did, something that they used to do before the Baal Shem Tov. Once the Baal Shem Tov came, you don't really have to do stuff like that anymore. And the Talmidim said, Rebbe, like, what in the world? You're a tzaddik. What are you rolling around in the snow for? And he said, sure, I could be a tzaddik, but in relationship to how much I grasped Hashem yesterday, I can grasp him even more today, and I have to do tshuva on that as well. Teshuva is not about moving away from the bad. Teshuva is about perpetually moving towards the good. Teshuva is a positive experience. Yes, we have to go through the al-khaits and the apologies, but in the end of the day, Teshuva is only possible because of the greatness of each and every Jewish neshama, that our truest essence is to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rabbi Nachman says, look at your current situation, fix what you can fix, and then when you feel that you fixed it, realize that there's another level for you to uncover. And then when you get to the top of that level, realize that there's another level for you. Because the process of spiritual work is never over. The only thing that is perfect, the only thing that is finished is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything else, as long as we're human beings, we are imperfect, not because we're broken, but because that's how we were created. And our job is to be perpetually renewing ourselves. Rabbi Nachman speaks very often about the need to begin again every second, to begin again every time, every day, 1,000 times a day, to start over and over and over and over again. So when I do tshuva, in relationship to who I was previously, I have fixed it. In relationship to who I can be in the next moment, I'm still standing at the Pesach. Right? Just as this, I imagine there's a floor on top of us, so when we look, this looks like the ceiling, this looks like the highest point in the room, right? But from a different perspective, it's just the floor of the next level. That's how we have to look at our lives. Each and every day is a new opportunity to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In truth, each and every moment is. But it has to be without lachatz, not with pressure, not with, oh, I have to be better, I have to do more because I'll never be good enough. It has to be, I'm good enough, I want to become better. I'm good enough, I want to become better. And in that way, a person can spend their lives in this perpetual process of tshuva that Rabbi Nachman describes. The Leshem Shoev HaChaloima. The Leshem was a chavrusa with Rav Kook. Rav Kook came to him to learn with him. He wanted to understand teachings and Kabbalah. The Leshem refers to tshuva as Tchias HaMesim. When a person fails, when a person falls, when a person is anxious, when a person is bothered, there's a certain death that takes place. There's a certain light that is distinct, that is extinguished in the mind of the individual. Which means that when I reignite myself and I uncover that light again, I'm bringing new life to myself. When we look at the bracha of Tchias HaMesim, it's not a bracha about something that happens in the future, it's a bracha about something that is perpetually happening. Mechayim Mesim Ata, you are currently being Mechayim Mesim. Where? It's us. Because every moment we fall, it's considered a death of sorts. And every moment we renew ourselves and we get back up with strength, we're recreating ourselves. And this Tchias HaMesim is happening perpetually. We descend for the sake of ascending even deeper. Because if it were not for our failures, if it were not for our struggle, then we would never know how to gain that new momentum to dig down deep into ourselves, to push ourselves even higher the next time. And that's what the Leshem Shoev HaChaloima means when he says that tshuva is a perpetual process, very much like what Rav Kook was saying. The Balatanya. Balatanya, the first Rebbe of Lubavitch, the Talmud Mufak of the Maggid of Mezrich, not only the student of the Maggid, but also he learned with the Maggid of Mezrich's son, so he was able to learn what a father was saying to his son as well, or what a father would say to a daughter as well. The Balatanya says that our souls, our neshamos, are like a rope that connects us to above. We're bodies down here, we have a body, at least soul, that wants to eat, drink, and be merry, and be stuck in whatever it is that we're stuck in. But thankfully we have a life vest, which is the rope of our neshama, which connects us to Shemayim. What happens when a person transgresses? What happens when a person feels that they've fallen away? They sever that connection. The soul is cut off on a certain level from Shemayim. That's what we refer to as kares, to be cut off. But the Balatanya says, very important, the only purpose of something being cut off is so that we can learn to retie it even tighter the next time. So that it's not about the fear of being cut off, God forbid. Fear-driven tshuva has been proven to not work whatsoever. It doesn't work. So it has to be driven by a desire for more and more connection. And so anytime we disconnect ourselves, it's now an opportunity to reconnect ourselves even tighter. We're retying ourselves to imagine that every time I try and fix something, every al-chit that I say, I'm retightening that knot between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because the more Hashem knows about me, the more He's going to be accepting of me. Because all Hashem desires from us is an honest and vulnerable heart. Hashem does not desire perfection. Hashem does not desire even our best. Hashem desires our honesty and our vulnerability, and the willingness to be tied even tighter comes along with the recognition that, you know what, Hashem, sometimes the string gets disconnected. That's the Balatanya. The Rav Soloveitchik, who again, it's nice that he's right after the Tanya. A lot of what Rav Soloveitchik was saying was coming from the Tanya. The Rav in his Al HaTshuva, which was translated by Pinchas Peli, speaks of two types of tshuva. There's kapara and there's tahara. There's fixing that which is broken, and then there's becoming even better. Both are absolutely necessary. It's not enough to remove myself from that which was broken. I have to move myself closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at every moment. It's not enough to push away the bad. I have to take on more and more good. It's not enough to be scared of punishment. I have to be so in love with Hashem that I'm terrified of doing anything that can deviate away from that love. This double nature of the Rav's tshuva is also found elsewhere in the Rav's writings. In Lonely Man of Faith, we see that there's two types of a person as well. There's Adam 1 and Adam 2. One who's just afraid of being punished, and one who's desirous of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the deepest way imaginable. Rav Shagar says that tshuva is about responsibility. It's about recognizing that, you know what, Rabbeinu Shalom, if I want to change, it's on me. And this is an important perspective sometimes, right? We can look to the mountains of the world and say, mountains, change me. We can look to our parents. We can look to the circumstances of our lives. And all of us have circumstances. In the realm of addiction, what we speak about is, we say, don't blame anyone. Not because there's no one to blame. There's infinite people to blame. Don't blame anyone because it's not going to do anything. Ultimately, the responsibility to be better, to move forward ever so slightly in our lives, rests upon us. That was Rav Shagar's treatment of tshuva, an inherent responsibility to respond to the call of the shofar, to respond to that call of tshuva that reminds us to be closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every moment. Rabbi Nosson of Nimerov, and this is an important one, says even a little bit. For Rabbi Nosson and for all the tzaddikim, Avodas Hashem is not a race. There's no destination. The quicker you can learn this, the better it will be for yourselves. The destination is the process. Every step that I take forward in this world, every gesture that I make, every desire I have, every positive thought I have, even if nothing whatsoever comes from it, it's written in stone in reality. It's worthwhile to come down into this world for 120 years for one positive thought. And we have to celebrate those positive thoughts. We're so hard on ourselves. We demand excellency from ourselves because we think the person next to us is excellent and the person next to us is excellent, and we're the only one who's not excellent, so we desire and demand excellency. And instead, what we need to realize is that the only thing excellent is the Ribbono Shel Olam. We're just trying to do the best we can. And when we do that, every slight step forward, every inch is worth celebrating. It's worth celebrating. Because in Shamayim, it's like traveling miles and miles and miles. And again, this is true throughout Rav Nosson's writings as well. Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh taught us that the real spiritual work is not done out here, but it's done in here. What the Baal Shem Tov did is he took the cosmos, he took existence, and he placed it into the heart and the mind of an individual. And where a person's mind is, says the Baal Shem Tov, where your thoughts are, that's where you are. Which is why the Lubavitcher Tzaddikim, the Lubavitcher Rebbe could say, Shrach gut v'zayin gut. Think good and it's good. It's not good. I have a way of thinking that makes it a little bit better. When I think about closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when I enter into a place of tshuva in my mind, and in that moment I want to be better, I am better. And I have to try cultivating a mindset of growth, of mindfulness and awareness each and every moment. Where my thoughts are is where I am. And the Vilna Gaon says that tshuva is rebirth. Everything about Yom Kippur is about being born with a fresh slate. It's like one giant mikveh. It's a clarifying, purifying process that cleans away all difficulty, that cleans away all regret, that cleans away all hard thoughts that we have about ourselves, and it opens us up to renew ourselves. The common denominator in all of these shitos, is that it only works if we believe in the power that we have. I can read all the books in the world, and if I think they were talking to people from yesteryear, or talking to people with bigger minds or bigger hearts, then I'm a kofir, then I'm heretical. I have to believe that every word of the tzaddikim is speaking directly to me. And when we believe in the power of the neshama, we begin to believe in the power of tshuva. We begin to believe in our ability to fix everything. Rav Kook Schlusi Ogenelenu says, Iker koishi hatshuva. The essential difficulty in tshuva is shelo mevinim kaluso. We don't understand how simple it is. That's the hardest part. The hardest part of tshuva is that we don't believe how simple it is. A person can change everything around in a second. And we have to get over this idea that my change is dependent on the outcome. The change is dependent on the moment, of owning the moment, of being present in the moment, of believing in myself and in HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that moment. And in that way we can connect ourselves to any of the drachim of the tzaddikim in tshuva, and we can learn to move closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every single moment of our lives. Be'ezras Hashem. Everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful Yom Kippur, an easy fast. Everybody should be nichtav b'safran tzal tzaddikim amitim, and it should be gemar chasima tova.
We'd like to thank Rav Joey Rosenfeld for sharing words of Torah and inspiration. We're looking forward. This is the first time he's been in Sha'alvim for Women, and we daven and we ask that this, God forbid, not be the last. Shana Tova, Gmar Chatima Tova, everybody.